Hey everyone, it's Charlie. It is June 15th. It is Monday. In 90 days, we've had an incredible rally in the stock market, 30+% up. Impressive by any standard that you want to use. Now, when you correlate that with the fact that we have had continual record job losses, we have had record foreclosures, and defaults on credit cards, on auto loans, on student loans, on every basic type of consumer loan you can think of, coupled with the fact that we're starting to see massive delinquency and default in commercial real estate. And let's not forget that now the average delinquent mortgage is not a subprime borrower. It is a prime borrower. So in spite of all that, this incredible Dow Jones has managed to rally 30%. Okay, now let me tell you why it's rallied 30%. Because there's only one reason why. It is the federal government has allowed the Treasury, along with the Federal Reserve, to take a year's GDP and pump it into the financial system, mainly into Wall Street. Either they directly or guaranteeing $13+ trillion at this point. And that is the only reason why, because there is not one fundamental out there that can point to why we should be having a 30% increase across the board. Not one sector, across the board. So, with that said, the eventual forces of the market are going to take hold, and they are going to find equilibrium with this attempt to fight the forces of nature, as it were, in the market. So what happens? The government starts making money out of thin air, and the interest rates start to rise because people are anticipating inflation. Now, that puts a stymie on this Wall Street-made, Federal Reserve-endorsed, Treasury-planned recovery, because they can't have real interest rates in order to inflate another bubble. They can't. They got to have it. They got to have it. Mortgage rates down at all-time lows for the housing bubble to stay inflated. So what do? They go to the countries that not even 30 days ago were making public statements of having zero faith in the dollar, trying to figure out how to get rid of it, trying to convert it into real commodities. These countries were making statements saying they were losing faith in the dollar. But all of a sudden, in 48 hours, these same countries are now saying, oh, no, we were wrong. No, the dollar's sound. We don't see any other alternative. Whatever their motivation is, let me tell you something. It isn't the truth. Their motivation isn't that they really believe in the dollar. Maybe it's because Russia holds 180 billion of them. Maybe it's because Japan holds even more than that, and China even holds more than that. And they don't necessarily want to see it go to zero before they're out of it. So whatever the case may be, you have these countries come out and talk up the dollar. And what happens? The dollar rallies today, up 80 basis points on the index. Still closes at 81 and change, which is far under where it has been. But it does the job of driving the rates down, and the 10-year yield closed at 3.7%, which is still pushing twice what it was when quantitative easing began. The downside is, just like in September, when the market crashed, and there was a flight to treasuries because people still think that that's a safe place to be, when they play the same game now, the market has to crash so people can flood back into treasuries. So, it's pretty obvious. We lose 200 points on the Dow, commodities drop, people are flying into treasuries, so the yields drop and their values go up. It's pretty simple that it's a shell game that's going on. Maybe it's before the G8 or maybe it's before this BRIC conference that's going on. Who knows? All I can tell you is it's a bunch of bull. I mean, regardless of what happens, regardless of what these countries say about the dollar, the truth is out there, right in front of you. They've doubled, tripled the monetary supply. Unemployment is still skyrocketing. Inflation's coming. Jobs aren't. The banks have the money. It isn't in the system. They're sitting on the money. Why? I'll tell you. Because they know the deflation of all of this asset, all these bogus casino-type assets that are still out there, that is still going to come home to roost. And they got to keep the reserves there. They're taking their money that the Federal Reserve just gave them, and they're putting it right back in the Federal Reserve. Even though their overnight lending rate is garbage, they're not making any money on it, but they know that they're better off losing there and at least getting the principal back than lending it out to somebody that's buying a house that's depreciating by 20% a month, a quarter, or lending it to the next strip mall. They can't keep the damn things full. It's falling apart. 70% consumer economy is officially over. And the arrogance of most people in this country overwhelms me at times. I've actually had people say to me on this very day that China will never flee the dollar because they can't make it without us. They need us consuming their labor in order for them to survive. And that arrogance just makes me sick. That 95 or more percent of this country believes that we are that much better than somebody halfway around the world. That they need to live in poverty and squalor so we can spend their money and we can borrow their money and borrow it from them so we can buy their stuff and they can live as peasants. What they don't realize is they're spending their way to the exact same standard of living. It's the same argument with having illegals come across the border because we won't do the jobs that they will. And you know what? That's accurate. We're too damn arrogant. We won't go out there and do landscaping or work in the fields. We think we're above that. So if you lost your job as a truck driver 2 weeks ago and you got offered a job to go work in produce fields, you won't do it. You'll sit on your ass at home and collect a check because you're above that kind of work. And you're going to find out really soon that you would bend over backwards for that job now or in the future. People's attitudes are going to change, and God help the ones who are not ready for the shock coming. The ones who don't know life without a McDonald's drive-thru or a cell phone on their hip. The ones who think that because somebody's brown and below the equator, or because somebody's living in Asia, they're not as much of a person as you are because you're an American. We're going to be choked to death with our own ignorance. Now, there was rallies in the streets last night in this country. And why? Was it because the Federal Reserve has destroyed 95% of the value of your dollar? Is it because your government has stolen and allowed Wall Street to hold a gun to our heads and steal $13 trillion and your future? Was that why there was riots in the street? No. LA won the NBA title. That's the country we live in. That's all I got.